I'm a fire lieutenant.
A real estate agent.
A personal trainer.
I'm a state representative in the state of Connecticut.
I'm a passionate wedding photographer of parties, and any other special events.
I am a police officer for the town of Simsbury.
I am a hairstylist.
And I am the transition counselor at Lewis Mills High School in Burlington, Connecticut.
I am the hatchery supervisor for the Burlington and Kensington State Fish Hatcheries.
I am a full-time freelance cartoonist illustrator.
I'm the state senator for the 8th District. I represent 11 communities in Connecticut.
I am the project search manager at Yukon Health.
And I'm working with the Board of Education summer program, and when I'm not with the summer program, I work with Project Search.
Some of the things I do at my job is help people to find independent employment and learn the skills that they need to achieve that.
I work up in Hartford at the state capitol, and we attend public hearings and meetings, and we meet with constituents or people that we represent in Hartford.
I am a full-time freelance cartoonist illustrator, publisher, mentor. I teach comics here and for other establishments. I have a really great job.
I work with young people who work on Yukon Health campus in Farmington, Connecticut. We prepare interns for an opportunity to get a job.
Some of the things I do in my job are day-to-day operations are cleaning and maintaining the fish ponds, which requires guys to get in and out of the water. To sweep the bottom of the ponds.
I style people's hair, and I provide services for them, such as waxing, haircuts, and stuff like that.
So in my job, I work with high school students to help them kind of assess where they're at and think about what they might want to do after they're in high school, after they graduate from high school.
I capture special moments. I create memories for folks who've got these great moments in their life, and so it's a permanent record. And then the folks that I'm involved with their photography, they're in my heart and soul forever.
You know, I not only help people purchase homes, but I help them sell their homes. That's the main thing, is helping people sell their homes.
Okay, so I'm able to work with the governor's office and able to work with ARC and a bunch of other nonprofit organizations to see what we can do to help them, along with the parents.
My job entails being in charge of firefighters and also incidents, emergency incidents and scenes where people call for motor vehicle accidents, small fires, large fires, different things that they may see as an emergency, sometimes may not be an emergency to others, like a cat in a tree. As much as people joke about it, we still get the phone calls.
As a police officer, I do a lot of different tasks. I'm assigned right now to our community services unit, which basically entails me being a representative for the police department to the community. So I organize different programs, I work with the elderly in our community, I work with the kids in our community, and I also do some patrol work where I'm out in the community responding to calls for service.
My first job, I think I was 17 years old, and I worked at Sage Allen retail store in Avon, Connecticut. I was a general sales clerk. I worked in lingerie, and I had great experience working with people and engaging with helping them make purchases.
I have been working, doing some sort of job since I was about 8 years old. So I started with growing vegetables, selling them at the side of the road. Started cutting lawns, shoveling snow. My first real job, if you want to call it that, where you're issued a tax form, is I was 16 years old in high school and took a job at a local family-owned grocery store.
I started as a babysitter for one of my neighbors, and I watched their 3 kids For the summer, I believe, let's just say that they were far from being the most well-behaved children. I think I remember an issue where one sibling got into an argument with another and shoes were flying, and I was happy to leave at the end of the day.
I got my first job when I was 16. I worked at CVS Pharmacy as a photolab technician.
I started my first job probably when I was 13. I had a newspaper route. Then from there, my freshman into my sophomore year of high school, I acquired a job at the high school as a custodian's assistant.
Yeah, my job was to do the dishes. It wasn't that bad. Peel potatoes. It was for a little restaurant in the town where I grew up, and I can remember it pretty clearly. Yeah, washing dishes.
My first job where I had to report specifically to a boss was at a local pizzeria, and I started as one of their front desk people. I answered the phones, I took the orders, I helped fold pizza boxes, and that was pretty much the extent of that.
My first job was when I was 16. I worked as a cashier at Chuck E. Cheese, and I also had to play Chucky.
I was 16 when I got my first job, and I worked in a restaurant. I worked as a hostess in a restaurant.
I started working for my grandfather when I was probably maybe 13 years old, but my first real job, I was 16 years old. I was told by my father, you will go out and get a job, and I think maybe a month or two after my 16th birthday, I went and got a job at McDonald's and worked there for maybe 2 or 3 months until summer hit, and then I ended up getting a job working for a mason, and ever since I've had a job.
I was a dishwasher in a local restaurant.
My very first job, I was probably 13 or 14 maybe, and I was a paper boy.
Well, my first job I had, I was 15 years old, and I picked tobacco in the tobacco fields. That's what I did. I didn't last there I only lasted a year there because I got a rash all over my hands from the tobacco. I grew up in Granby, and so I would walk to the bus stop at 5:30 in the morning, and the Culbro tobacco bus would pick everybody up and bring us to East Granby to the farms. And we'd go out in the fields and we'd take care of the tobacco plants. And then my job, when I turned 16, my first job was at McDonald's restaurant, where I liked it because I liked the quarter pounder with cheese and the french fries.
I learned how to be a hard worker, and I learned that you're not going to like everything that you get asked to do at a job, but it's part of your job, and you do those things that you don't like to do for those days that you do the things you do like to do.
I learned how to ride a bike pretty good. Well, from the Maritime Aquarium internship was probably the most influential thing that I did as a high school student. I would volunteer every Sunday. I did it for 4 years. I learned all about seals. I worked with seals. I worked with sharks. I worked with jellyfish. I worked with a whole range of marine animals. And I made a lot of good contacts for my future employments.
I feel that my human resources skills play over time and time again in even what I do now today with my people who have intellectual disabilities. I'm constantly using those skills, my customer service skills, and on continually teaching everyone to be professional no matter what the job is that they may start out with. I let them know that that's just a stepping stone to their career job.
From my first job, I think working in retail, you kind of learn how to work with people well and how to respond to people appropriately. Even though in your head you may be thinking something else, you learn to respond to people better.
Yeah, that first job was a great experience. Work ethic is clearly one of those things that I think is most important. Students sometimes don't understand the importance of showing up on time, being task-oriented, having initiative, and being helpful and going out of your way to help a customer when they're in need. So I think going forward from that, I realized that I needed to work hard, be there, and be, a good representative of a company.
I learned that you need to be polite to people and kind to people if you want kindness and respect in return.
Was there anything I learned from my first job? Yeah, that I didn't want to be a dishwasher. But that was something, that follows you through life. You're gonna wash dishes every day, if you get ready for work or you get ready to, to end your day, you want to make sure you have a clean start in the kitchen or whatever. But I knew I didn't want to do it all day.
I think there's one common theme about what you learn in a job that you can use in virtually anything you do, and that is do the very best you can at all times. Have a passion for it, even if it's not your dream job, and work hard. Continue to learn, and be kind to people. If you whatever the organization you're working for or whatever you're doing for a job, if you get along well with people, that's half the battle, and that's going to make your life a whole lot better.
The thing that I learned at that pizza job that I still use today is patience and kindness. That some people are just having a bad day, and you may be the one person that they kind of lose their patience with. And so if you greet everyone with a smile, you take everything in a patient, calm way, then chances are that you can change somebody's day. There were some times where there were some pretty angry people, and I learned that by speaking in a calm tone, treating them with respect and kindness, even when I was kind of losing my patience myself, it made it so that it changed their demeanor and allowed me to work with some difficult people now that you might encounter.
Well, in the first job, my father instilled in me that, you have to put your best foot forward, and you only get one chance to make a good first impression. So making sure that you're there every day. I never missed a day of work. I actually never missed a day of high school, and I've never missed a vote in the state of Connecticut. So you do your due diligence and you do the job that you're hired for.
What I learned from my first job was, I had a very good boss. He taught me a lot of good work ethic in the fact that, you get your work done.
Well, you can imagine sometimes that working at McDonald's, you have to be friendly. You're supposed to be courteous and make sure that the customer's always right. So those were, I think, skills that I learned throughout my law enforcement career, because I always treat everybody with respect, and also in my legislative career as a senator, being able to listen to people and understand, and then making them feel like they're being serviced.
You're looking at it. As a teenager, I wanted to be exactly who I am, which really makes me count my blessings, because I'm very fortunate to be able to do what I love to do for as long as I do it. And I have a great support system. Like, my family really helps me. I get to bring my family here to work. Not many people, can say that. Like, I can bring my kids here to do stuff. I can bring my kids on the road. So I'm very, very fortunate to be able to live the dream job that I wanted from my youth.
What I want to be? I had no idea. I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up. My future, the horizon of my future, was probably about the next day. I had a lot of interests. I was in theater. I, of course, even back as a teenager, loved taking photos and growing things. I had a lot of different passions and things I was interested in, but had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up.
My career goal as a teenager was to be a teacher. I had always worked with kids, I babysat. It just kind of seemed like the natural thing. And my parents said that when I was younger, I was a pretty bossy kid and I liked telling people what to do, and it ended up working out well for me as a teacher later on.
I wanted to be a lawyer when I grew up. I wanted to be a lawyer because I like to argue with my parents.
I wanted to be a teacher when I grew up.
What I wanted to do when I grew up was be a marine biologist. So I went in college, I went to Roger Williams University, where I studied marine biology and business management, which is how I got my start in working in aquariums.
As a teenager, at one point I wanted to go to the Air Force, and then later I decided that I wanted to be a corporate attorney. So I have a business major. Who knows, someday I might go back and pursue that.
Well, when I was a junior in high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I wasn't a very good student. So my mom says to me, well, Kevin, you like to drive. She says, why don't you become a policeman? And so the secretary at the high school I went to, her husband was a state trooper. So I asked her, I said, can I go with your husband one day just to do a ride along to see what it's like? And it was like the coolest thing I ever did. And I said, oh, this is what I want to do. And then I became a policeman.
I think I always knew that I wanted to take this career path. I always had an interest in law enforcement. My mom worked in a courthouse, and I would go to work with her sometimes, and I would see the police officers come in, and I was always very intrigued by them. And so I always had an interest in doing this, and it was kind of my focus when I went to college.
My career goal was human services and working with the most vulnerable people within our state and within the country.
So as a teenager, I thought when I grew up I was going to be an attorney. In fact, I was convinced of it. I never thought anything else would be suitable for me.
So my career path was when I was hired as a policeman. My mentor, the police chief in the town of Granby, he told me that being a police chief is like being a public official. He says, you want to get involved in your community, join civic organizations, do things. So living here in Canton and working for the town of Canton, I joined some different organizations, and I thought, well, maybe I'll run for local office because that might help me become a police chief later on in my career. And since I lived in town and worked in town, I couldn't be on the Board of Selectmen, I couldn't be on the Board of Finance because of a conflict of interest. So I ran for the Board of Education right here in Canton, and I won my first election. And so I did that for 5 years, and then I started seeing some things that Hartford was saying, the legislature was saying, you need to do this in Canton, you need to do this in Canton. And I kind of got a little upset about that. I said, well, some of the things you're telling us to do, we don't think that's a good idea for our students. We should be able to have more control over our local boards. So some folks said to me, well, if you don't like it, why don't you run for state office? So I did, and I won my first election as a state representative. It was very close. I won by 41 votes. And then I ran for the state senate after a while, and I've been pretty successful in that. I think my last election I won by 12,000 votes, so it's a big difference from the first time I went from 41 to 12,000. So, so far it's going pretty well.
My path from my first job to my current job was a wiggly one. You know, when comics were not really seen as a career move when I was a kid. Like when I was a younger person, you know, you could find comics everywhere. You could find them at the grocery stores. You could find them at pharmacies. You could find them at the convenience store. I wanted to make comics. In school, it was tough. I honestly thought that I was going to be able to make the jump right from high school to, you know, go to New York City, and that didn't work. And I had a friend who brought me to the local community college and got me enrolled there. So the jobs that I had while I was going to school, I was waiting tables, I was cleaning carpets, I was doing, you know, all sorts of stuff. But my eyes were constantly on the prize. The real job was school.
I started as a photo lab tech, and I worked my way up to a photo lab supervisor. And then I was actually able to get into a beauty supervisor department at CVS. And then I started working in a couple salons, and I ended up probably about 5 years into my career being able to start doing it independently and working for myself as opposed to somebody else.
After completing my visual fine arts degree 2 year, I did try to get a job at a package design studio, which was really kind of the indicator of where I wanted to head. You know, it was a great guy, Mark Lewis, a graphic designer, an artist. Like, he honestly was talented enough. He didn't even really need me around, but I would ease the burden of some of the work. The first chores that I had in the office, I was cleaning the office, I was going through files, I was organizing receipts. So like I never even really got to draw until 6 months in, and then bam, then it started. All of a sudden I'm drawing for candy packages, and I'm drawing for video game packages, and it was a lot of fun. And that's really what kicked it off. And it was after that job I opened up my own studio and kind of mirrored the work ethic and the schedule that Mark introduced to me.
My job at McDonald's, being the first job, it was kind of a little starter. And then after that, like I said, maybe 3 months later, I worked for a mason during the summer, and that was Monday through Friday from 6 in the morning till 6 at night. Probably one of the best jobs I ever had. I went to bed every night tired, and I made good money at 16 years old. I was making $13 an hour, and even today, that's still good money.
Do you know what minimum wage was when you were making $13 an hour?
$6.90. So I was making almost double what minimum wage was. But I also worked for that money. I had to mix the mortar. I had to help carry brick up 3, possibly 4 stories at sometimes, block for chimneys. So I had to do quite a bit. Stone wall work we did. It wasn't very easy, but like I said, at the end of the day, I felt like I accomplished something. And then after that, I ended up working for a thread company, Liberty Threads in Winsted, and I worked for them after school because I had gone back to school, so I couldn't work for the mason any longer. So I ended up working for the thread company for the next summer, and that carried me into senior year. That was my senior year, and I ended up working after that as an EMT for 2 different companies, both Campion Ambulance here in town, in Torrington, and also Vintech. Vintech is a service that provides EMTs and paramedics to volunteer ambulances who cannot find staffing during the day. So I would go to volunteer ambulances in New Hartford, Winsted, Morris, Litchfield, different places, and I would be an EMT for 12 hours during the day, and I would respond to calls with them. My next job after that, I ended up getting hired by the Electric Boat Fire Department down in Groton, Connecticut. I worked for them for 2 years, being a firefighter on submarines and a shipyard. So it was a little bit different. There was a completely different job, I guess you could say. As a firefighter, I'm used to going to houses and going to car accidents and whatnot, and this was going to big giant ships that go underwater and going to factories. So I got to see a lot of things that people normally wouldn't be able to see because it required government security clearances. So I was able to go into reactor compartments and different parts of the submarine, where they launch the torpedoes from, and the command module where they steer the submarine. But I was also able to inspect the buildings, and I learned a lot in that, in inspection and in code enforcement.
Yeah, so taking off from the human resource spot that I had accepted and worked at, I moved my way up pretty quickly. But when I started my family, it was very difficult to see how that would work with travel requirements and long hours. So I made a choice to stay home and take care of my children for about the next 10 years. But during that time, I assessed kind of what the skills were that I really liked in my human resources job. So I then went on and went back to grad school, and I got my master's in school counseling. So during that time, I realized that when I was at Pratt & Whitney, I really liked working with young people. I liked helping them figure out their career paths. I liked the counseling piece, and going into a school counseling role, I could then help students in that same way, which is what led me to be here at Lewis Mills High School as a transition counselor.
My first real job out of college, I majored in accounting, took an accounting job right out of college. After 2 months, realized I hated it, and I didn't want to be an accountant, even though I was good at it in school. And I took a job at Aetna back in 1982 at the age of 22 years old, and worked there for 29 years.
I believe if I look at things in my journey, because my major is business management, I thought that my Conica years, because I worked in various departments, that was going to be my stepping stone to business management. But because I enjoy working with people, I'm a people person, it seems that I've worked in various jobs where I'm always either doing customer service or something marketing related. So I'm just a people person. I prefer changing lives, impacting lives.
Okay, I left Aetna voluntarily in 2011, which was 6 years ago. I started doing weddings as a side thing back in 1990. I got talked into it by a coworker of mine at Aetna. She says, "I want you to do my daughter's wedding." I said, "I don't do weddings. I capture people, and I love capturing people at their very most natural best, but I was scared to death about doing a wedding." And she said, had all this confidence. She said, "You're going to do my daughter's wedding." Well, I did the wedding and loved it. And it was through a number of years where, word of mouth takes a long time when you're only doing a wedding or two a year. But by the time 2005 or so rolled around, I was very busy. And when Aetna offered a voluntary retirement program in 2011, the timing was perfect. I was spending all my time, all my free time, doing weddings. And so that was a perfect launching point. I left the company, set up my website, joined up with a wedding planner in New York City. So I've been doing ceremonies and surprise proposals in New York City, and take photos for a couple local magazines. So my life now is kind of a gig mentality where I'm doing weddings and photo shoots for magazines. And I was just in New York City yesterday and did 2 surprise proposals in Central Park.
So from when I was 16 and I was working in a restaurant to being 22 and getting hired as a police officer, I did a lot of different things. I graduated high school. I went through 4 years of college where I worked all through college. And when I got out of college, I thought I might want to be a police officer, but I wasn't really sure. And I did explore some different things for about a year, and I decided that I would apply to be a police officer. But I went into it thinking that this might not be what I want to do for the rest of my life, but it's been something that I have always been interested in doing, and so I'm going to try it. And if I don't like it and in 5 years I want to get out of it, then I will, and I won't have any regrets walking away from it. But I got into it and I loved it, and I'm closing in on 10 years here and still very happy.
So I started working at Chuck E. Cheese as my first job. Then I moved, when I went to college, to working at Lane Bryant, which is a retail clothing store. While I was in college, I also worked as a resident assistant, as well as in the residence life office at the campus, so it was all connected there. After college, I did the Disney College program, so I went to Florida and I worked at Walt Disney World in retail. When I returned, I started working at ShopRite with my mom and a friend from there. When I moved out of my parents' house, I started working at Stop & Shop, and then that same friend's girlfriend worked at Favarh, and that's how I started working here.
Basically, I studied human services at Northeastern University, where I went on and I did a co-op program. I was occupational and therapist at a rehab center. So I was able to work with the elderly. I moved on and did some business classes. I opened my own small business for 10 years. I was able to take a couple years off where I was my brother's coach for the 1995 International World Games for Special Olympics, where he won a gold medal. And I was very intrigued with working with that population and glad to be a coach for that.
What do I get to do in my job that other people don't get to do? Well, you come in here, I am the president of the company, and I am also the janitor. And I think a lot of people, when they go to work, well, I'm not going to say a lot of people. There are a lot of people that work for themselves, but I think that most people don't wear all of those hats. Like, they're required to do certain functions when they go to work. I have to tackle every aspect of my job, and Free Lunch has grown when it had a lot of people under it, and it's reduced down to me. And sometimes I get to bring other people in if I want to. It's a privilege to be able to call all those shots and to kind of control where the ship is headed.
It varies. During the wedding season itself, I will go to a wedding rehearsal. If it's a Saturday wedding, on the previous Thursday or Friday, spend a 15, 18-hour day at the wedding the next day. But then I'll spend the following week working on the pictures, downloading them, getting rid of the ones that don't look good, doing some editing, special effects, starting to share those sneak peeks with my couple. I might actually have other small gigs during the middle of the week, but for the most part, I'm doing editing.
I get to really interact with students, and for the most part, it's always on a positive note, especially with high schoolers. We're at a place where we can talk about, meat and potatoes. What do you want to do? How are you going to get there? Putting aside family issues or troubles that they have in their life, we really need to start focusing on kind of what they're going to do when they leave here. And having a corporate HR background and working in a business environment, I feel like I have the ability to direct students into types of employment as well as work skills that will be valuable when they leave here. So that day-to-day contact and the resources that I call upon to assist them when they leave, I'm not sure a typical educator has that same opportunity like I do.
I get to meet a lot of new people in my job. Every day I get to deal with numerous people who have different life experiences, different things they do, and all of my clients are very interesting people. I think that's the most interesting part about my job, is all the different types of people that I can meet.
When I was responsible for a lot of people, there were a lot of times where I found myself explaining myself to people that I didn't even know because of things that were happening under those different studios. So it's interesting. Like you're doing the trash, you're doing the bills, you're working on the next comic. One part of my job that I love, that I know a lot of people don't get to do, I go to these different events and I just talk about my job. And like these chamber events, these business networking events, I love that. That's a very fun part of my job. And all it does is it just enhances my network, and it just spreads the visibility of who I am and what I'm doing. I really get a kick out of that. And if you think about it, I can't imagine too many people go to meetings to just stand up and do commercials basically live for an audience. But I get to do that too. So if you think about my job as a whole, and if you break it up from 100%, I would say that 60% is probably business related, like PR, accounting, maintenance, that kind of stuff. And then the remaining percent, the remaining 40 is probably the actual art itself. So that kind of creates its own challenges.
Well, in my full-time job working for Eversource, I like it. It's similar to police work in that I work in the community relations department, and I never know what's going to happen. I provide, how I describe my job is I provide a concierge level service, which is like presidential service to towns. And so they only have to call me up, and I run around the company and answer their questions. And that could be from energy efficiency things to street lights to new service to power outages, those types of things. And in the Senate, I get to do and see a lot of different things that I would never be able to do in my normal day-to-day life, or have conversations about things that I really would never, I don't think I would ever talk about because it just wouldn't cross my plate. But I'm forced to have a conversation about it because of my role in the state Senate. So that's pretty cool because you talk about things, and you get to meet a lot of really cool people as well.
Something I do in my job that most people don't do in their daily job is spawn hundreds of fish every year, and I raise millions of trout and salmon eggs.
I guess some of the things I do in my job that most people don't get to do is I get to help people reach their dreams. I get to help people and teach people from my experience and knowledge how to handle difficult situations that'll allow them to be successful in independent employment.
I think the job of a police officer is extremely diverse. I do so many different things. I've taken care of dogs that have been hit by a car. I've put out fires in people's houses. I've done CPR on somebody. I've taken, a baby's leg out of a chair that was stuck. Our job is just so diverse. We go to talk to people at the worst moment of their lives and try to make things a little bit different. So you're playing that role of almost a counselor or a therapist. I get to do something different every single day, and I think that that's really what makes this job very unique.
I think in a given day in my job, I'm changing or impacting lives, and I speak to a cousin of mine often about what my day-to-day is like, and I think I make her jealous because I interact with different people, especially this summer program. I met people that I have never met before and gone to different job sites that I've not been to before, and we go in and we let them know that we are serious about what we're there for and that we really do make a difference.
Yes, I don't think I would change anything. I may have, instead of going into the service, I may have chosen college over the Air Force. The reason I joined the Air Force, again, my goal was to be in law enforcement, and I thought the experience from that would help me. But the goal changed.
If I had to do it all over again, I'd probably choose the same path. I think each of those little steps along the way changed me as a person and made me work harder and learn things that maybe I wouldn't have experienced otherwise. So I would probably keep the same career path.
I think the one thing that I would have done differently in life if I were to do it all over again is spent considerably more time and effort on schoolwork. That would have probably allowed me to go to a different school possibly. I might have picked a different professional vocation.
That's a hard question. I don't know. I don't really have any regrets when it comes to the career path that I've taken. I think I came into this position at a good time in my life, and the flow of it has been really good.
Sounds like you gave it a lot of thought.
I did, yeah. I gave it a lot of thought before I came in, and I kind of came in with that open-ended that this may not be for me, and if it's not, I'm okay with that. But when it was a good time for me, and I grew up here. I came here when I was 22, and I married here and had a child here, and so this has become a family outside my family. A lot of times I see these people more than I see my own family, so it's really important that dynamic is very important to me. If I didn't have that, then that might be a regret for me, but I don't have any regrets.
Good question, really good question. I feel like I've been very lucky. I've not followed the track that I wanted to initially do, but I've been able to learn from each one of those experiences and move on. In this role, I feel like I call it affectionately a paid hobby, which is a great thing when you talk about work. If you can find something that you love to do, it never really feels like work. So I can't say that I would do anything differently. I think the key thing that I took away from is that every experience offered me growth.
If I could do one thing differently, I probably would have started working on my own a lot sooner than I had. Where I was at my first hair salon job, I felt stuck for about 5 years, and I wasn't really going anywhere in my career at that point.
If I could do one thing differently, I probably would have done more internships during college. I did 4 years of interns in high school, and then during my senior year in college, I did 3 different internships at New England Aquarium in Boston. I was a penguin intern, I was a vet technician intern, and I was also a travel and exhibits intern, which was more business oriented. I probably would have started internships earlier in my college career just because it gave me such great experience.
If I could do things over again, I think I would still continue down this path, but I would make small changes, which would, I guess everyone can say when they're older, I would do things a little different. Because knowing what I know now, there would be different things I would tweak to give me an advantage in certain levels, but the satisfaction in helping people and everything, I think I would still follow a career in emergency services. Whether it would have been police or fire or EMS, it still would have been down this road.
If I could give myself, when I was a teacher, if I could go back in time and advise my teenage self, I think I would say stay focused, be ready for change, be ready for the technological advancement and how it's going to affect, what you want to do in your career. I would say to be patient and to understand that it's okay to be told no, and it can end up being an empowering experience. Take your hit, get up as quick as you can, because in my business, and with anybody else that works for themselves, you're going to take your hits, you're going to have your victories, you're going to have your losses. How do you turn those losses into victories? How do you celebrate those losses? How do you wear them proudly? Really, it's about mindset, and I think if I could go back in time, I would tell my younger self, be patient, be positive, see the big picture.
My teenage self, I would say, go for it, reach the stars, and life is changing every day. Just flow with it and continue to be flexible.
So some advice I would give myself as a teenager would be to know that a job is just a job. It doesn't have to be your career, but every job teaches you something that helps you achieve the career and your goals in life.
If I could give my teenage self some advice, it would probably be to not think about what everyone else was saying. A lot of people told me I wouldn't be able to make it very far in a hairdressing career, and I definitely made it pretty far, I guess.
I think teenagers really have to realize that, high school is kind of a bubble. It's a place where we all begin, but there's so much more outside of here. So I think looking back at some of the things that we have an opportunity to do while we're in high school, it's really important to kind of continue to take those opportunities to grow and to meet people. I think that in every place you go, there's people that can help you along the way, and people are more than willing to help. So I always think wherever I am that it could be the next step to something really, really good.
I probably would have said, buckle down a little bit earlier. I mean, it's what parents always tell their kids, you should study and do the best you can. And I really care because, again, I was a late bloomer. I didn't graduate from college until I was in my 40s. So I did it. It's what I wanted to do, but I had to do it when I was ready to do it.
Think about what it is that you really want to do, but know that your path may change as you do different things. You may have a job that you think you're going to like, and then you're doing it and you really don't like it. So, just know that you've got to be flexible with your plans.
If I had to give myself some teenage advice, it would be work hard. In school, in anything else you do outside of school, extracurricular, I would also say that it sounds crazy, but I would try to save money. if you get a windfall, whether it's a gift of some sort, save it for the future. By saving extremely early in life, gives you the opportunity to have financial independence later in life, because the one thing a young person has on their side that's more powerful than anything else is the power of compounding. It's time. And compounding is such a powerful concept that even Einstein could not fully comprehend its power. Most of us have to have resources and have to work for them. So you can also have a dual life, one where you're working very hard and you're trying to develop a skill that's marketable so you can get a job, pay the bills, start saving for later in life and for any other needs you have. The other thing is, make sure you do what you love and what you have a passion for at all times. Whatever that is, make sure you make time for that, because later in life, that passion could actually result in a second career, something that you can actually pursue and do full time. In my case, it became weddings, wedding photography, and I deeply love it, and I have a wonderful time in my life now doing it.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.